All right, well, we'll get underway. Good morning. My name is Garrett Sheehan. I'm President and CEO of the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce and Quinnipiac Chamber of Commerce. Our topic today is cybersecurity, new laws that are effective October 1. That's Friday, just around the corner. We want to thank all of our investors who help support our programming here at the Chamber. That includes our webinars, that includes the resources that we offer through the Chamber. As you see on your screen, you can see all of the logos and names scrolling across. Again, a big thank you to all of our investors at the Chamber. We could not do the work that we do without their support. This program today is brought to you by our Technology Council. Encourage you to get involved, and the Technology Council is presented by Comcast Business. So I'd like to welcome in John Setti with Comcast Business. He's a senior sales manager. Say a few words to get us kicked off. John?
Excellent. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. You know, the topic today is really near and dear to me and also Comcast Business. Cybersecurity. A couple of stats, and then I'll go into a topic of a product that we just launched. But 67% of small businesses have experienced a cyber attack in the last 12 months, even with antivirus and firewall protection. 70% of cyber attacks are targeted to small to medium businesses. So a lot of people think about the targets and the different large big box stores that get attacked, but 70% are small to medium businesses. 83% of the small to medium businesses, 83% of them lack the funds to deal with the repercussions of a cyber attack. And that's a reality, and that's scary. 60% of all small companies that succumb to a cyber attack, they go out of business within 6 months. Now, this is all according to the U.S. National Cybersecurity Alliance.
Great. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. And big thanks to Comcast Business for supporting the Chamber, but also the Technology Council, and excellent product that it sounds like all small businesses are in need of. So thank you for sharing that with us today. All right, well, we're ready to get to our panel. We have a really strong panel for you today, and we're going to start off with Jeff Brown. And Jeff is the Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Connecticut. And just a little bit of background of what we're going to talk about. You heard John mention it. We're getting into cybersecurity, affects so many of our businesses, but also a new state law. I'll introduce our other panelists right now, and then we'll turn back to Jeff to have him say a few words. We also have Joseph Fortner, Jr., an attorney with Halloran Sage, and our other panelist, Jason Pufall, VP of Information Security Services with Bancorp. So let me start off with Jeff. And Jeff, I'm sure securing the state's technology information is a huge job. Not only is it a sprawling organization, but a lot of sensitive information. And also now we have this new state law that the governor signed into effect that goes into effect on Friday. So thanks for joining us, and interested to hear some of the thoughts that you can share with us.
Yeah, and thank you very much. Appreciate everybody showing up today. And today we're going to talk about a couple things, but first let me give a little bit of an introduction to myself. So Jeff Brown, I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Connecticut. I am also the first person actually in this role, which is kind of an interesting. We've had people really running security, obviously, for the state. It's not like we didn't really have that level of leadership, but now it's really up to the governor's level, right? Like now it's a much more critical priority for the state and for all of our municipalities and the 169 towns in the states, and really looking at just how do we secure all of that. And it's a very interesting problem. I know that a lot of folks, I would really underscore the fact that many security attacks are opportunistic. They happen, and they can happen to small, medium, large companies. And that really means people find a vulnerability to take advantage of, and they take advantage of it. One of the things that the state has done, and this actually is perfect timing because it coincides with October, which is cybersecurity awareness. This is really going into effect at the perfect time. But Public Act 21-119. So this act really accomplishes three different things, but just at the high level, it incentivizes cybersecurity by providing the protection against punitive damages for covered persons. We'll talk a little bit about what that means. But basically, it really, it does three things. One is it expands the definition of personal information. So that was something that already existed in the state, but now it also covers things like medical health insurance, subscriber information, individual taxpayer numbers. Believe it or not, that was not covered as personal information before. Passport numbers and government identification, biometric information, which I thought was really a great addition. And I worked personally with Representative Caroline Simmons, who unfortunately couldn't be here today to go over this bill, and she really was the sponsor of it. However, one of the things, if you look through Connecticut history, there's been a number of different proposals similar to this, and one that was even identical almost, but it just didn't pass. One of the reasons, well, there's really two reasons. One reason is that it was just at the wrong time, and I think that, just the awareness of security in general wasn't really strong enough. And the other thing was that it was done in a vacuum. So this was very interesting in that Caroline Simmons reached out to, myself, Mark Raymond, who is the Chief Information Officer for the state, as well as a number of other folks from CIS, the Center for Internet Security, really getting like our input into what would constitute a really good bill with this. So we're really proud that we were able to get that done. The other two functions that the bill has is it also reduces the maximum time required for security breach notification. That used to be 90 days, which is, that's 3 months, so that's quite a bit. Keeping in mind that some industries are held to specific standards that may be as tight as 24 hours, that dates, our dates have been reduced to 60 days. I would love to see that go down a little bit more even, but at this point, it's a step in the right direction, and 60 days is the new time frame to report a security incident. Then the final one and the most important piece of the bill is that it provides a security safe harbor for compliance with other breach notice requirements. So what does that mean exactly? So really what we're doing is incentivizing the adoption of a cybersecurity framework. If your particular business already uses one, that's fantastic. You may already be compliant. And then if you don't, we've called out a number of specific frameworks like ISO 27001, HIPAA for healthcare, the NIST cybersecurity framework, high tech. And again, if you're a healthcare, we don't expect you to, kind of implement NIST, right? You have HIPAA. What you should really do is have an industry appropriate framework that you're working off of. And then in exchange for that, really it provides protection from punitive measures. Now, this is a really interesting topic for me because, cybersecurity is one of the few things where, it's like the victim is almost punished in many cases. And it's, if somebody breaks into your house as an example and takes a bunch of things, you're a victim in every sense of the word. And yet when somebody breaks into your company and steals data, a lot of times the focus is really on the victim, like they should have had stronger security, or why didn't they, do something different? We have to move out of that. We can't punish the victim. So this is really, I think, a very good step in that direction. If you have a framework, this is now something, and of course you have to be compliant with it to, a specific release. But really what they're just trying to encourage is just best security practices. If you do lock your doors and windows, make sure that you have security alarms, things like that. That behavior is now incentivized by providing some level of legal protection. That's kind of a high level of the view of the bill. Again, I think it's a real good step in the right direction. We will be, kind of evangelizing this, I think, with the small business community. And no business is too small. I mean, this is really down to a single person LLC or, large businesses in the state. Obviously, I think companies like Aetna and things like that are already in pretty good shape from a security perspective, but, we're trying to get everybody else, up to that right level. And we'll be doing a number of different activities in the state to help, kind of reach out to the business communities, and really help them learn how to, how to kind of secure their businesses and their data, because in some cases we've seen like ransomware attacks where a company might be out of commission for weeks, months. In fact, we're actually working with a third party right now who has a system that was attacked by ransomware. They're talking about a full year to recover this and get it back to where they needed it to be. So think about that, for a minute. Like, could your business absorb, we're going to spend a year rebuilding a system that we already had? So, I mean, this is, I think, just a really important topic. For a small business, this could be the end of the business, right? For a large business, typically the targets and all of the big companies, they tend to move on and the stock rebounds and everything kind of goes back to normal. But for a small business, these cyber attacks can just be devastating.
Thanks, Jeff. We appreciate it. And we'll come back to you with some more questions. I know you can't stay all the way till 11 o'clock, so we'll make sure we get questions into Jeff early on. And I do want to just let everyone know, if you have questions, you can start putting those in the chat, and we'll be getting to those in just a couple of moments. Let me turn now to Joseph. And Joseph, I'll let you talk about topics that you're interested in here, but maybe just following off of what Jeff said. Do you find that a lot of businesses, especially small businesses, realize the amount of liability that's out there for them if they don't have strong cybersecurity?
There's a variety in companies. Some of them, unfortunately, some seem to still have the put the head in the sand attitude, and it won't happen to us. And by the way, if it happens to us, it's going to cost us so much we don't want to think about it. But I think you're finding more and more people, more and more companies, business, small or large, recognizing the importance of that. And I think that's one way in which this bill is very important to provide incentives to do this. It's a first step in the right direction. And I think it's going to help move us in that direction quite a lot, because one of the things that I think we've all found is that the time to do all the work, the time to do all the preventative, time to get yourself ready for the attack is before it happens. Either you avoid the attack or you've got the safeguards in place to know what's happened, to limit the damage, to get back up and running, and if necessary to give the notifications rather than having too much of a disruption. So doing the homework now before the attack happened is absolutely critical. Just to talk about the bills, and I'll try to avoid repeating anything or too much that Jeff mentioned, although I may have a few little comments that are a little bit different. There's two, as he said, there's two different bills that came into place. One is the data breach notification bill. The second is the cybersecurity protection plans. Connecticut's had a data breach notification law for quite some time, 36A 701B. And one of the things it provides, which is different from some other states, is it's triggered not just by unauthorized acquisition of personal information, but also by access to personal information. And that itself can trigger situations where you may not think that it's required. As Jeff said, historically, notice has been required 90 days after discovery of the breach, given to those who were affected, and also has to be given to the AG's office, Attorney General's office at the same time. There were carve-outs, et cetera, and the penalties for noncompliance then and now involves a CUTPA, Connecticut Unfair Trade Practices Act violation. The statute says specifically it shall be a violation if you do not comply. What the new law did was several things. First of all, the old law provided that it applied only to companies that maintain or own computerized information as part of their business. That limitation is now gone and now applies to anyone who owns licenses or maintains computerized data that includes personal information. So you don't simply have to be someone who's maintaining this information. If your company has it and you discover there's a breach, you may have a notification obligation. It expanded the scope of what is personal information, both on the framework law, the cybersecurity framework law, and also on the data notification, which is, I think, a huge step in the right direction given the kind of information that gets given out. And notification is required for unauthorized access or acquisition unless the personal information has not been secured, when the personal information has not been secured in a way that it's unusable by others, or unless an investigation, an appropriate investigation, discloses that affected persons will not be harmed by this, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. The time to give notification is shortened to 60 days from discovery of the breach, and that itself could make lawyers very happy talking about when is discovery of the breach, when is not discovery of a breach. The only time that you don't have to report of those circumstances if you find after an appropriate investigation, that's the language in the statute, the breach will not likely result in harm to individuals whose personal information has been acquired or accessed. So the burden's on you to show that, not on anyone else. The law has means of notice, separate means of notice for passwords and for login information. And as I said, failure to comply is an Unfair Trade Practices Act violation. Now, it used to be that if you're the appropriate investigation, you determined there wouldn't be harm, you had to go to law enforcement and get their agreement that there wasn't going to be that kind of harm. That has been changed at this point, and you don't have to go to law enforcement. The second statute is the cybersecurity, as Jeff talked about. There are listed within the statute the various industry recognized frameworks that you can comply with. Some apply to better for some industries, some for other industries, and that's something that you'll have to make a decision on which one you want to adopt. If you do adopt a written protocol that follows those frameworks and you follow it, that's also required as well. The carrot that you're given at that point is that claims for punitive damages shall not be assessed in Superior Court. Now, it's interesting that the original bill as it came out actually offered an affirmative defense against claims for failure to file reasonable procedures. The bill, as finally signed, instead limited it to punitive damages, and that undoubtedly was a fair amount of negotiation that Jeff probably is well aware of. But at the end of the day, it's probably not as strong as in some other states where an affirmative defense is offered, which means it would completely block the claim. Instead, it is a prohibition on claims for punitive damages. However, there is a carve-out to the carve-out. If the claim is based upon wanton conduct or willful conduct, you will not get the safe harbor. So you can't sit there and adopt something and say, hey, I'm great, and then turns out you didn't do anything and you did that intentionally. So watch out for that. Unclear from reading the statute, and obviously this hasn't been litigated yet, as to whether that affirmative defense would apply in federal court as opposed to Superior Court. The language in the statute just talks about Superior Court. So I suspect that's going to be tested at some time relatively soon. But if you do apply the standards, you do get the safe harbor, and it is certainly a good step to try to incentivize small businesses and others to adopt these frameworks.
Great, thanks, Joseph. Really good information, and I know we'll come back to you in a few minutes. I'm sure we'll have some questions about the specifics of the law, and as you were just referring to, how safe is the safe harbor, and we can get more into that as well. Let me welcome in Jason Pufall, and Jason, add you to the conversation we're having here, and maybe some of the things that you're seeing that businesses can do to protect themselves from these vulnerabilities.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. So I have the opportunity here to segue or to dovetail off of what people are talking about. And I think something that both Joe and Jeff mentioned is the idea of these attacks being opportunistic. And I want to spend a minute on that. At Vancord, we probably do one incident response job almost every month. They're really common. And I can say pretty confidently that there's a lot of really common elements that lead to a security event. I'll say ransomware really feels like the sort of cybersecurity epidemic. And a lot of companies that we talk to say, well, we don't have data that attackers will care about, right? Or we don't have information that necessarily puts us at risk. And in reality, these cyber attacks are really financially motivated events. And it's not necessarily, do you have Department of Defense data or regulated data that somebody wants to steal? It's, do you have any data that they can either encrypt or steal and disrupt your business and extort you for money, right? And I think it's really important that people recognize that, because there is no sort of exempt business, right? There's nobody that an attacker isn't going to potentially target. It's very opportunistic. They're going to use the easiest path to compromise that they can. I think there are some really fundamental security controls that every business can put in place to better protect themselves. So one thing I'd like to quickly draw everybody's attention to, and I'll post this link into the chat, is NIST recently put a draft publication out called the Framework for Ransomware Risk Management. And it's a really practical, reasonably short, for NIST standards for sure, reasonably short document that outlines things that companies can do to better protect themselves against ransomware, right? But what I like about it is it's risk management, right? It's not preventative necessarily. It's what things can you do to better either identify an incident if you have one, potentially recover from one if something happens, and to some degree prevent it, right? We see a lot of gaps, very practically speaking, that are as basic as unpatched machines, right? Unpatched servers, unpatched personal workstations. These attackers, because it's a financially motivated event, these attackers are looking for the greatest return on investment they can. And if they can compromise a business that never applies security patches or just has out-of-date software versus one that does patch, it's easier to compromise an unpatched organization. The reason I'm spending time on something as fundamental as patching is it's largely free to do, right? So, we talk about the budgetary challenges that companies face and the challenge to sort of implement some of these complicated frameworks. The reality is there are a lot of opportunities to make security improvements kind of on the cheap, right? Patching, vulnerability management, some basic security awareness training for your employees, those can largely be done, either free or really inexpensively, and I think provide real tangible improvements to a company. I think a couple of stats that jumped out to me that are interesting, and I think it just gives a sense of just how widespread this is. I think 2020, there are 635,000 different phishing websites available, right? So if you think about that, right, your employees are receiving phishing emails, they're redirecting them to generally pretty well-crafted external sites to the tune of 635,000 possibilities out there, right? These social engineering attacks exist because they work. It's really important that we spend time educating our workforce so that they can identify those and be that frontline attack. The security industry really emphasizes technical controls a lot of the time. I believe training is equally important to any technical control, and frankly, any technical control can be subverted by a single mouse click by an untrained employee. So I think there really is the idea that you need to do those very basic blocking and tackling security measures, patching, vulnerability management, coupled with training. And then ultimately, as your security program develops a little bit more maturely, look at some of those more sort of attack specific or maybe more costly security measures. But I think they're definitely an iteration here. But it is important to recognize that these are financially motivated events and somewhat data independent. The other thing that I would talk about, because I think we have had some legal discussion here, right, around what your regulatory requirements are during an incident. These are long events. So when there is an incident, the first, in our experience, say 3 to 4 weeks typically is that sort of containment and restoration phase. That's, I think, when there's a lot of activity and there's a lot of visibility on the incident. The tail, which is really your notification and sort of all the regulatory requirements, that can potentially take a couple of months to deal with, and making sure you get your notices out and making sure you meet all of those responsibilities. So these events are protracted even for smaller companies. It's really important to make sure you take steps to understand what your obligations are there and take those sort of proactive steps to try to reduce that potential exposure and potential risk to an incident as they come.
Thanks, Jason. And maybe Jason, you can take us to the very basics too, because and I know you're touching upon this in talking about small businesses are vulnerable. With so much cloud computing, a lot of things aren't stored at a company now. They're using some private company. But that still that doesn't mean that you're safe, right? Is that a good way to describe it? And I'm sure a lot of people think that they are because it's not their system or they have their data stored somewhere else.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't. I will say, one of the benefits, in my opinion, of cloud computing is that it does, those companies do a nice job of keeping their software current and keeping their applications current, right? So there definitely is some benefits to having your sort of key systems in a cloud hosted environment, right? And I'll sort of be generalized like that. And potentially there is some sort of risk transfer opportunities there to say, listen, we've got another company that hopefully has their SOC 2 and hopefully has some other certifications that managing our data now, and you know, they'll protect it perhaps a little bit better than we do. But what we see all the time are companies that do utilize third parties to host data, but then regularly do data extracts locally because it's easier to do some sort of data transformations or data management locally. So you sort of bring that risk back, you know, back internally, right? In the days of a remote workforce, it's even more complicated to manage, you know, what are the security risks to your employees, right? They're not coming to a physical building, you know, as much now, right? So you don't have those centralized controls that might provide some protection to your, you know, electronic workstations or maybe your employees' data. How do you actually then sort of control that data better? What safeguards can you put in place for a remote workforce, still get the visibility that you need, still get those protections, but permit people to work in the environment that they're used to now? So I think we're really seeing clearly a change, and I think a change that's going to stay regarding where people work and how people work. And we really need to be mindful now of how do you protect that remote workforce? How do you understand where your data is? How do you understand what people are doing with the data? Those are challenging questions.
Jeff, at the state level, maybe as we just kind of unbundle the threats that are out there right now, what are some of the things? I'm sure the state is a large target for hackers out there. And then if you really boil it down, you know, we're talking about the weakest link, one employee who does something. You know, what is the simplest thing that they can do that then all of a sudden you can be dealing with a major attack? Is it as simple as opening an email or opening a PDF? What's that point where the real vulnerability starts?
Yeah, great question. And unfortunately, it's down to an individual doing the wrong thing in many cases. You know, I can tell you that there was a well-known cybersecurity company that had a very public attack. And one of the things that had happened was an administrator had been, you know, system administrator had been specifically targeted. This individual had an email that contained malware with it, and it actually went to his spam folder. But it had a juicy topic, and he pulled it out and he clicked on the links. Now, when it's in the spam filter, links aren't active. It should have been, you know, relatively safe. Unfortunately, they did the wrong thing. You know, he pulled out the file and, you know, basically clicked on the link, and suddenly the entire company was compromised. So that's tough. That's a really tough problem to deal with. I mean, the state has 30,000 employees. You know, trying to educate every single person and really depend on everybody doing the right thing. That's not a great strategy, but that doesn't mean you don't try. So one of the things that we do, we actually do self-phishing tests where we actually send, like, you know, kind of a mock phish to people and see who clicks on it, try to educate them. But obviously, you know, you're always dependent on like that one person doing the wrong thing. So, you know, from that perspective, you have to have multiple layers of defense. So we have a number of different protections in place. You know, the state's at a little bit of a disadvantage compared to a company in that we are very often, you know, a target from nation states. That's a problem that wasn't really around as much, you know, let's say 25 years ago when I got started in cybersecurity, where you know, it was more like a handful of technical, you know, skilled attackers. Now we have nation states, and they're like, you know, you have now people who do this all day, every day. They're funded by the government. They essentially have a blank check, and they can just spend all that time attacking us. That's a really tough threat to you know, to defend against. I mean, if you kind of think about it, like a repeated attack consistently over time eventually gets in usually, you know, so we have that kind of a problem. But you know, again, the more levels of defense that you can put in place, the better. And that does make security a little bit complicated in something like the state, where we have not only, you know, several branches of the government, we have, you know, kind of quasi agencies, we have the, you know, the municipalities that are not under our direct control. So we really try to work with all of our partners here. The good news is that on the federal side, we have, you know, the Critical Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, Department of Homeland Security, FBI, the multi-state ISAC. We have a number of different federal partners, so we're not going it alone.
And Jeff, maybe just for, you have different levels of sophistication of people who are on here, but how do these attackers come up with these plans? I know, even in our office, my employees will get, an email from me saying, can you do me a favor? It seems really detailed that they know enough to use my name to someone else in the organization. So, from what you've seen, what is going on? How is someone just sitting there going through websites trying to generate information to be able to make these attacks as smart as possible?
Yeah, they certainly do. And it used to be that, you had these like really obvious spelling errors and, things that were just kind of painfully obvious for most people. Things have gotten very sophisticated now. So you might get a very specific email from your boss asking you to transmit money from one account to another, and people have fallen for that kind of stuff. So be careful what you put on social media, like, try not to overshare information. All of those kind of things. We are now in a day and age where, if you look at the Conti ransomware, which is a very well-known, ransomware, there's a gang behind that, right? But I mean, like, ultimately, they also do ransomware as a service. So you can actually hire them on the dark web and, so the skill level has gone from, these sophisticated technical attackers like Kevin Mitnick and Kevin Polson and all those, like, kind of back in the 90s kind of people. And now it's just like anybody can do this, right? So now we're in a day and age where the bar has been set very, very low for the attackers. And that means we have to raise our bar in terms of what we do for defense.
And Joseph, as you speak with companies, it just seems that we probably, for the majority of them, don't have the structure in place, just even as we're talking about regulating employee behavior, to be able to handle these threats that are coming at companies. Is that what you're seeing? And what's the place for a business to start to really start to shore up their policies and how they handle cybersecurity?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that a lot of the I'm sorry, was that a question for me?
Well, I was
go ahead and run with it, Jeff, and I'll follow up.
Sorry about that. I would just say a couple things real quick. In terms of just like, again, the free things that you can do, patch, maintaining your systems, replace things that are end of life. A lot of people don't think of that, right? Like, you don't necessarily think of the cable modem or the router that you're connecting with. Is that still getting security updates? Do you know how to update the firmware, things like that? So, I mean, all of those kind of the free things that you can do, I think, are super important. As you get into being a bigger company, you need to really, hire people to do this and maintain that kind of a security program.
Yeah, just to follow on what Jeff was saying, obviously keep trying to patch, keep things up to date. I've had situations where the attack came in from a PC that was barely being used for anything, and no one had bothered to update it for years, and that was the vulnerability that they found, and found the way to get in to use that, and it simply was something that no one really thought of patching. So an audit of all your technology, both your software, your hardware, your network, all of that is an important thing to do. But I think, as we've all been talking about, a lot of it is just training, because the biggest vulnerability is the brain-finger interface. And when you see the email, do you just click on the link? Do you look to see where it came from? And training your people to do that, because you can, as we all know, you can see what the email address is if there's any suspicion, and determine whether or not it's legitimate or not. At least you can get a start. And training your people, when in doubt, don't open, don't click. I've seen clients who have had sophisticated email spoofing campaigns in which they've had long conversations with hackers. It's been remarkable where these folks have gotten in with them and ended up getting money transferred to them simply because someone didn't look to see early on in the process that there was just a little variation in the email address, and that was enough to get things running. So doing the training, doing the patching, trying to keep yourself as up to date as you can, if you don't have a lot of revenue to spend on consultants, et cetera, is a very important place to start. And then reminding them over and over as things go along, not just a one and done. You can't do a one and done approach from the standpoint of the frameworks. In fact, the Safe Harbor Bill specifically says that if you adopt one of the industry standards, if it is changed, you have 6 months to update your own framework to meet that change. That's a good incentive, and it's something that really ought to be part of what companies do. They need to keep on looking. They need to keep on training. They need to keep the patches going.
If
Jason,
I could add,
oh, go ahead, John.
Garrett, I'm sorry. Yeah, if I could just add one thing, and I'm sure a lot of companies do this, but Comcast periodically sends all of its employees fake ones to see if we click on stuff that we shouldn't be. And if we click on something that we shouldn't, we get a big skull and crossbones on there and we get notified. And it's a good reminder for us to always be on the lookout.
That's a great point. Great
You
point.
know, Garrett,
Go ahead,
so you did mention though, how do people research this, right? And I think it's really important, I think, to recognize that, this idea of a hacker being, the hoodie in the dark room, it's just gone, right? To Jeff's point, maybe that was, 1990. It's not anymore. And I think we have to look at this more as a professional office in a lot of ways, right? They're targeted attacks. There are things that people plan out and execute. And, unfortunately, we really are on the defensive. And there's some really key things that we can do to help reduce risk. But the reality is somebody who's persistent can ultimately get in. But these aren't performed on a whim. They are intentional. Companies typically, to some degree, are targeted, right? There might be some sort of drive-by things to get a sense of vulnerabilities, but they're executed attacks, often organized, in a boardroom to a degree. There's a manager who identifies what they actually what their target opportunities might be. There's people who execute them. We need to move away from this, this television motivated idea of, an individual in a dark room with incredible computer skills. Like, that's just not reality anymore.
Jason, what are some of the costs? Or, I've sat through some meetings where, cybersecurity experts said, a Cadillac list of things that you need to add. What is the minimum that small business needs to add to protect themselves, but also remain within a budget?
So I'm going to say two things here. First is, and I'll throw this link in the chat as well. Vancorp now has a security podcast that's designed for sort of the business owner, right? So we really try to avoid really detailed security language and try to make these things as accessible as possible. But we do have a variety of topics. I think our current topic this week really is, what can businesses do sort of from a fundamental security standpoint, right? To really sort of bolster the security program kind of on the cheap, right? Or what are those core things? And in reality, it doesn't have to be wildly expensive. If you train your employees, frankly, you could bring in a company like ours to have a conversation with employees for an hour at, I think, a really reduced or really reasonable cost. You can patch your machines pretty much for free, right? There's really no vendor that charges for patching. I would say that, unpatched machines account for 75% of the security incidents that we're involved with, right? Making sure that you've got well-secured remote access policies, because we often see that sort of the VPN, right? And hopefully people are familiar with the term of the VPN, or the virtual private network. Remote employees utilizing VPNs to get access to corporate resources is a huge security hole that is reasonably easy to address, but often ignored, especially as we all transition so quickly to remote work, I think, in a manner that was unprepared for a lot of companies, right? And then finally, I would say I'm a big advocate for multi-factor authentication, or two-factor authentication, if you're familiar with that. The traditional username and password isn't enough to protect most systems or most data sources at this point. And coupling that with a second factor, something you have, right, a token or whatever, is a hugely valuable and reasonably inexpensive security control. So, I could go on, and I think, the podcasts probably provide a whole bunch more detail on that. But, patch, two-factor, train employees, and look at remote access. If I had to boil it down to four things, that's where I would emphasize right now.
As we start to wrap up, Jeff, what are the key takeaways that you give to employees? And then what do you want businesses to know about the new Connecticut laws to help protect them, but also protect their customers?
Yeah, look, I think I think we've covered a lot of this, in the talk today, and I think that that's really great. But I think the key takeaway is really, treat cybersecurity seriously. It's once it's a problem, it's too late. Relentless preparation is really where you want to be at. Making sure you do cover a lot of these obvious kind of basic things that we've already discussed, like patching. And then, it's like you don't necessarily need a CISO and a giant security program and millions of dollars to do that. As you get bigger, though, you probably do, because, again, at the end of the day, individual employees. I mean, cybersecurity is really about people, because if a system gets compromised and nobody cares about it, then it doesn't really matter, right? So, at the end of the day, cybersecurity is really all about people, and making sure that individuals are aware of their responsibilities to protect company data, sensitive data, and making sure that every single one of them like kind of understands that they're part of that process, and even just having something as simple as, I've been in some big organizations where business people didn't seem to know how to report a security incident, and it's like you really need to get down to that level and make sure that people know what to do and how to report things.
Thanks, Jeff. And Joseph, as we've been talking about this, I'm sure when you're talking with potential clients or clients, there's always some hesitancy about showing your vulnerability, that you've been breached. Now that you have to, at what point do I have to tell customers, maybe it wasn't that bad, do I really need to reach out to them? What's your advice on that? There's a huge legal liability there as well.
Now, my advice on that is take every one of these things seriously. The ability to say, I just had a ransomware attack, I can just put in my old backup and I'll be good. Don't rely on any of that, because you may have an obligation to report, and you may have issues that have arisen, even if it is just an extortion kind of situation. So the key thing is, if you first of all, prepare in advance and have what's going to happen when, not if, but when you get attacked. You want to be in a position to deal with your remediation plan immediately. Get the right players involved as soon as you have any inkling that there is any kind of a breach, and that includes outside consultants, not just your in-house IT person. Preserve the evidence. Don't just wipe out your servers and put something new in because you've now made the investigation about 50 times harder than it might have been. Cut off the ability for other people to get in. Once you know there's a vulnerability, you want to disconnect so that things don't get worse. And something we haven't talked about, if you've got cyber insurance, notify the carrier. Don't blow your insurance policy by not notifying the carrier and have them say you didn't make a claim early enough.
And is this a growing area of liability? We talked about the safe harbor that exists now. More and more consumers or other companies looking to sue someone if they see this type of breach happen and they think it impacts them?
Absolutely. And given that personal information the definition has been broadened in the statute, and given some of the breadth on who is now required to do the data breach notification, sitting back and saying that it doesn't affect me, you simply can't look at it that way anymore.
Great. Thanks, Joseph. We appreciate having you on. And Jason, one of the pieces we haven't really spent a lot of time talking about is forming a cybersecurity policy. So what will be some of your advice? Obviously, we went through some of the really easy steps that people can do to better secure themselves, but actually thinking out and writing that plan and then disseminating it to employees, what would you recommend?
So for smaller businesses, I'm generally an advocate of remaining policy light to some degree. An acceptable use policy is really critical, making sure that you're outlining to employees what your expectations on their behavior in the workplace are, so that they understand, really, what's acceptable, what's unacceptable, how do you expect them to use systems. That's a really important thing to outline. You do want an incident response plan, having prepared responses to these, understanding what your communications requirements are, your regulatory requirements are, having a partner in the space if you don't have the security organization, right, which I expect most folks on the call today don't. Understanding who you can call. I think to Joe's point, which is really a great one, companies too often skip all of the containment and forensics and jump straight into restoration, right? Thus destroying a lot of key evidence and potentially, keeping themselves at risk, right? If you just restore from a backup that's 2 days prior to an incident, many of those same vulnerabilities likely exist. You don't actually make improvements. You destroy all of the evidence. You then don't have good information from which to make some of those sort of legal or regulatory decisions. Having a partner ahead of time to help you navigate that, I think, is really important. So working through an incident response plan is really key for this. And I would advocate that everybody look at that.
Great. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Jason, Joseph, Jeff. Really great information. John and Comcast Business, you can reach out to John. They have many tools that will help you in this area. And we do want to let everyone know about some of our upcoming events. So we do have our annual meeting coming up on October 14th. That's going to be in person at the Omni at 3 o'clock. You can go to our website to register. And also Leadership Greater New Haven coming up as well. Go to our website for that information. As with all of our webinars, this recording saved onto our YouTube page. So if you missed it, you want to share it with someone else, a lot of great information. Feel free to pass that along. You can go to our YouTube page, go to our website to reach it, and we will have this recording up in the next day or so. Again, thanks to all of our panelists, thanks to Comcast Business, and hope you all have a great day.